The rain had been falling for 2 straight days, a relentless curtain of water that turned the small town's streets into brown, swirling streams. The sky hung low and heavy, a blanket of dark clouds pressing down, making the afternoon feel like midnight. In a cramped, dimly lit apartment on the edge of town, Marcus Reed sat hunched at his kitchen table, staring at the pile of unopened envelopes in front of him. Some were from the power company, others from the bank, but all carried the same quiet threat: money he didn't have, bills he couldn't pay. The single overhead bulb flickered, casting long shadows across the peeling wallpaper. In the corner, the fridge hummed weakly, holding little more than a bottle of milk, half a loaf of bread, and a jar of mustard. Marcus wasn't the type to complain. He'd been raised to handle his struggles in silence, but lately, the silence felt heavier than the rain. His mechanic job at the local garage had been cut months ago, and odd jobs barely kept him afloat. Outside, the rain drummed against the window like an impatient visitor, while the wind howled through the narrow alley behind the building. Every so often, Marcus glanced toward the small photo frame on the shelf, his late mother, smiling, holding his hand when he was just a boy. She used to tell him, "Storms don't last forever, baby. You just gotta hold on until the sun comes back." He clung to that thought now, though the storm, both outside and in his life, showed no sign of ending. Somewhere deep inside, he didn't know this storm wasn't just here to take from him. It was about to give him a moment that would test his strength, his courage, and his heart in ways he could never have imagined. By mid-afternoon, the rain had turned from a steady pour into a furious downpour, hammering the rooftops and swelling the gutters until they overflowed in violent streams. Marcus pulled on his old jacket, its zipper stuck halfway, and stepped into the storm to check on Mrs. Turner, his elderly neighbor who lived 2 doors down. The water in the street was already ankle-deep, rushing around his boots as he fought against the wind. He was halfway down the block when a sharp, desperate sound cut through the roar of the rain. At first, he thought it was the wind playing tricks on him, but then he heard it again, clearer this time. A high, terrified voice. "Help me!" Marcus's eyes swept the flooded street, and then he saw her, a small figure clinging to a bent street sign, the water churning violently around her tiny frame. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. Her soaked dress clung to her trembling body, her hair plastered to her face. The current pulled at her like invisible hands, trying to drag her away. Marcus's heart kicked hard against his ribs. There was no time to think. Without hesitation, he splashed into the water, the freezing current stealing his breath instantly. The deeper he went, the stronger the pull, pushing and tugging with frightening force. His boots filled with water, his jeans heavy and dragging, but his eyes stayed locked on the little girl's pale face. "Hold on," he shouted over the wind, though he doubted she could hear him. Each step forward felt like walking through a wall of invisible weight, but he pushed on, muscles straining, adrenaline surging. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "Not today. You're not losing her today." The water surged around Marcus like an angry beast, each wave threatening to knock him off his feet. He reached the girl just as her small fingers slipped from the bent sign. For a terrifying moment, she disappeared beneath the churning surface, and his chest seized with panic. Then, there, a flash of her tiny hand breaking the water. Marcus lunged, his arm shooting forward, fingers locking around her wrist in a grip he refused to loosen. She was shivering violently, her lips pale blue, eyes wide with fear. "I got you," he gasped, pulling her against his chest. The current slammed into them, almost tearing her from his grasp. Every muscle in his body screamed as he turned toward higher ground, his legs straining against the pull of the flood. The water was cold enough to numb his skin, but the ache in his lungs kept him moving. Halfway back, a thick branch, carried like a missile by the torrent, struck his shin with a sickening thud. Pain shot up his leg, but he grit his teeth and pressed on, his mind locked on one thought: don't stop. The little girl's weak voice trembled against his ear. "I'm scared." "I know, baby," Marcus panted. "We're almost there. Just hang on to me." Step by agonizing step, he forced his way through the water until, finally, his boots met the sloping edge of the curb. With one last surge of effort, he stumbled onto the soaked grass of a front yard, collapsing to his knees as the girl clung to him, coughing up water. Somewhere nearby, sirens wailed through the storm, growing louder. Marcus cradled the girl in his arms, shielding her from the wind, his chest heaving. For the first time that day, he allowed himself to believe, maybe they were going to make it. The girl's breathing had steadied, but she remained wrapped tightly in Marcus's arms as the sirens drew closer. Moments later, an ambulance screeched to a stop nearby, its lights casting flashes of red and blue across the rain-soaked street. EMTs rushed out, but they weren't alone. A woman, drenched head to toe, heels in one hand, eyes wild with panic, sprinted toward them with a scream that pierced through the storm. Maya. The girl turned at the sound of her name. Mommy. The mother dropped to her knees, scooping her daughter into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. She kissed the girl's face over and over, whispering words Marcus couldn't hear. Her body trembled, her hands shook, and relief poured from her like a flood even stronger than the one that had nearly stolen her child. Marcus, still on the ground, soaked and shivering, simply watched. A quiet warmth stirred in his chest. He had no idea who the woman was, but he was glad. Glad the girl was safe. Glad he had gotten there in time. The mother finally looked up at him. Her eyes, fierce and grateful, locked onto his. You, her voice cracked. You saved her. You saved my baby. He tried to smile, though exhaustion tugged at every muscle. Anyone would have done the same. No, she said firmly, taking off her coat and laying it across his shoulders. Most people stood back. You didn't. One of the EMTs helped Marcus to his feet. He waved off the stretcher, even though every part of him ached. He didn't want attention. He hadn't done it for praise. What he didn't know was that the woman he'd just reunited with her child wasn't just any mother. She was someone with power, influence, and a heart that never forgot the ones who showed up when it mattered most. 3 days passed. The storm had moved on, but its mark was everywhere. Mud-streaked streets, toppled fences, and the smell of damp earth lingering in the air. Marcus was back in his small apartment, sitting at the same worn kitchen table, nursing a sore leg and wondering how long before the landlord's patience ran out. He hadn't told anyone about the rescue, not even the few friends he had. To him, it was just something that had needed to be done. That afternoon, the sound of a car engine outside caught his attention. It was smooth, expensive, out of place in his rundown neighborhood. A sleek black sedan pulled up, and from it stepped the woman from the flood. She wasn't in soaked clothes this time. She wore a tailored navy suit, her hair neatly styled, but her eyes were the same, warm, sharp, and unshakably grateful. Marcus, she said with a smile. I hope I'm not interrupting. He shook his head, unsure what to say. She handed him a thick envelope. I haven't stopped thinking about what you did. You risked your life for my daughter. I can't repay that, but I can try to make sure you never have to choose between survival and doing the right thing again. Inside the envelope was a job offer at her company, complete with a generous salary, and a cashier's check large enough to wipe out every debt he had. Marcus stared at it, his hands trembling. I don't know what to say. Just say yes, she replied softly. You saved my world. Let me help rebuild yours. Marcus felt a lump in his throat. Sometimes, storms didn't just destroy, they cleared the way for something new. And for the first time in a long while, he believed his own son was finally breaking through.